There was laughter in the woods, but no one was there. Paranormal M investigates places where the rules don't apply. Subscribe now. The Haunted Girl at the Tracks. Reading through all these posts today kind of made me think of something that happened when I was younger. It's been rattling around in my head for years now. I don't still know what to make of it, but let's see if you can make something of it. Way back when I was in my 20s, I used to hang around with this guy from work named Danny. He had a younger cousin named Clara. I met her a couple of times, usually when Danny's family would host barbecues. She wasn't exactly talkative, just kind of hung back smoking cheap cigarettes, even though she was barely out of high school. She always gave me this unsettling feeling. Not scary exactly, but like she was tuned to a different station than the rest of us. Anyway, Clara killed herself when she was 19. Jumped in front of a train near our town. I didn't go to the funeral. Well, I just wasn't family, but Danny told me. And one night years later, we're sitting out behind the bowling alley after league night. We're drinking some beer from the trunk of his car. He started talking about her, and he told me in this low voice that Clara used to mutter things. And not all the time, but when she got mad at someone. Stuff like, he's gonna get hit by a car, or she's not gonna be around long. Things like that. I don't know if she was angry or not, I was just guessing. At first, Danny thought she was just being dramatic, but then people actually started dying. One guy that she said that about, they got crushed under a tractor. It was on his uncle's farm. Another, they overdosed a couple of months later. Danny swore there were at least 3 like that, maybe even more. And something that stuck with me was that he said one night at the bonfire party out in the woods, we were both there, by the way, he overheard her whisper, "They should all just be gone." I didn't hear it myself, but he swore she said it, and within the year, at least 4 people from that party were dead. 1 drunk driving, 1 overdose, 1 freak accident with a combine. And Clara herself on the tracks. Danny kept saying, "That's too many. That's way too many to be nothing." And he was half drunk and shaking his head like he wished he hadn't even brought it up. I laughed it off at the time, and I said small towns always have stories like that. But the truth is, I still think about it. I still remember sitting in the smoke and in the dark, and crickets were loud as hell, and I was trying to listen because Danny was whispering. She said everyone. What if that meant us too? And I swear, even after all these years, that sent a chill through me I couldn't shake, and yeah, 2 guys from our bowling team are dead now. Coincidence? Probably. Probably. Keep interesting company. The Old Mill Night Watch. So back when I was working security at this busted old textile mill that had been turned into storage units, I had the graveyard shift, midnight to 6 a.m. It wasn't glamorous. Mostly just me, a thermos of coffee that never stayed hot long enough, and a lot of walking through hallways that smelled like damp cardboard. So they gave me a set of keys, and they gave me a checklist. It was the same deal every night. Make sure all the units were locked and lights out, gates chained. Seemed simple enough, but that place, it just didn't feel simple once the clock hit 2 or 3. The mill had 4 floors, and it was kind of an old, creaky wood, and there's exposed pipes everywhere and all that. You'd think the basement would be the worst, though, right? where the boilers were. Nope, it was the upper floors that got me every damn time. I would hear footsteps. They were slow, like somebody walking with heavy boots on. Always just ahead of me, like I was following somebody I couldn't quite see. The door would slam shut down the hall, and when I got there, it was locked tight, padlock and all. Sometimes I'd switch off a light and turn around, and when I looked back, bam, lights back on. I told myself it was just old wiring and drafts and whatever, and for a while I almost believed it. Then one night, maybe a month in, I'm finishing up on the top floor, and I was already spooked because I kept hearing this dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor above me, even though I was on the top floor. There wasn't a floor above, but, well, I'm guessing there was a roof. But anyway, I was heading back toward the stairwell when I caught this laughter. Not adult laughter, kid laughter. Clear as day, coming from inside one of the locked units. It was that high-pitched, giggly kind, the kind you can't mistake. And underneath the door, I swear to God, I saw light, like this pale yellow glow seeping out, even though I'd switched off the whole row of lights myself. Stood there maybe 3 seconds. My heart was hammering in my chest. I was trying to convince myself I hadn't just heard that. Then I just muttered a loud, "Nope," out loud, and I turned and went straight down the stairs. Didn't even finish my checklist. I told myself that I'd double back in the morning with the day guy, but honestly, I just didn't. I pretended I had. And from then on, I started, quote-unquote, accidentally skipping that top floor. To this day, I still can't explain this, and sometimes when I think about it too long, I swear I can hear that giggling in my head. The 5 Visitors. I'm not a nurse or anything fancy. I'm just a guy who's been working nights at a care home in a small town for the past few years. It's not a hospital, more like a halfway spot for folks who aren't sick enough to need constant doctors, but not well enough to live alone. I clean, I make tea. I sit with the lonely ones who can't sleep. That kind of job. Kinda feel ya. Anyway, I never thought much about ghost stories. Though people always say care homes are thin places between here and whatever's next. I used to laugh at that. Now I'm not so sure. The first time something strange happened was with this old man named Frank. Surgery had gone fine earlier that week, and the doctor said he'd probably be home soon. He even joked with me about teaching me cribbage, since I'd never played. Cribbage? But one night, my coworker, this quiet lady named Marcy, he pulled me aside and whispered, "He won't be here too much longer, I don't think." Thought she was just kind of being dramatic or, I don't know, trying to get attention or something. But 3 days later, Frank was gone. I didn't connect it to anything until a few months later. That's when I was making rounds around 2 in the morning. There's this hallway with bad lighting, and it always flickers, and I swear I saw somebody slip into Henry's room. A tall, shadowy shape, like a person but too dark and too smooth. My first thought was maybe a visitor had stayed late, but when I checked, Henry was alone, snoring softly. Nothing unusual there. The next day, his blood pressure crashed. He ended up in the hospital. He came back, but weaker, and everybody said he was lucky, but Marcy wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked her finally, and she told me this thing that's been stuck in my head ever since. She said she sometimes sees, quote-unquote, visitors standing near the head of a bed. Dark figures, quietly and waiting. 1 or 2 might hang around and the person pulls through, but when there's 5, which is always 5, then the person doesn't come back. She told me she'd seen 4 with Henry during his hospital stay, and I laughed it off because, well, What else do you do? Then I remembered the figure I'd seen that night. That would have made 5. Henry passed away 2 weeks later. Peacefully, they said. Now, I don't know. Well, I could be just seeing things in bad lighting, and it could be a coincidence, but every time somebody dies here, I think about it. Marcy says it's like when one person passes, 2 more follow close behind, like ships sailing out together. And damn, if it hasn't happened like that more than once. Sometimes I wonder if the figures are really family waiting to guide them, like people say. Or maybe it's something else, like something less, well, kind. And I don't know. But I do know this. I can't walk past an open door at night without checking how many shadows are standing by the bed. The Thing by the Barn. A couple of years back, I was helping my uncle on his farm, and he's pretty old school, you know. The kind who still writes notes on scrap paper instead of using a phone. That's not that old school. Maybe I'm just old. I don't know. I'd stay over at the farmhouse when it was planting season because he'd wake me up at like 4:30 a.m. It was easier than driving in from town. One night after a long day, I was out by the barn around midnight. I'd gone to check if the side door was latched because the wind kept rattling it. My uncle was always paranoid about all these animals getting in the feed. It's pitch dark except for the moon. Bugs were loud as hell, and I had one of those cheap flashlights from Walmart, the kind that seems to die whenever you need it most. So I just walked in. The air seemed cooler inside and smelled like hay and some oil, and I remember hearing the hum of the old fridge that he keeps out there. He keeps a bunch of soda and Dr. Pepper and stuff in there, sometimes bait. I clicked off the light for a second just to listen. Dumb thing to do, but I did it, and I swear I saw something move near the tractor. Just this shape, kind of crouched low. Thought it was maybe one of the neighbor's kids messing around or some stray dog, but the head, it seemed to tilt. Like slow, like it was trying to get a look in at me. I just froze. I told myself it was just my eyes adjusting, you know how shadows do play tricks. But I felt in my gut, that weird cold feeling that makes you want to run, but your legs won't move. And after what was probably only a few seconds, I slammed the door shut and bolted and didn't even bother to latch it. Next morning, first thing, went back out with the sun shining and the whole barn looked normal. No footprints in the dirt floor, no sign of anything. Tractor was there, same spot. Uncle said I probably dreamed it half asleep, but I know I wasn't dreaming. I had the flashlight in my hand and my heart was pounding like a drum. Don't know if I imagined it or if something was actually standing there in the dark waiting. The abandoned mill on River Road. When I was 17, back in my own little town, used to be this old grain mill on River Road. It was half collapsed and leaning over the water like it was trying to fall in. It had a main building with busted-out windows, a smaller shack out back, and a rusted silo that somehow still stood. The place was technically off-limits, but of course me and my cousin snuck in a bunch during summers. Everybody swore the mill had history, and supposedly there was a flood in the 1930s that drowned a handful of workers inside. Later, somebody said a drifter got shot there in the 60s. Who knows how much of that's true, but the place did feel heavy, you know. Anyway, one night we're poking around the main building. The river was running low, so you could hear frogs and stuff outside. But from the inside, it was usually dead quiet, except this time we're in there, and I swear, I hear a girl's laugh clear as day from the back corner. Not loud, not echoing, just like somebody was standing right there, and what's crazy is my cousin had his earbuds in. one in, one out, like he always did. And he heard it too. We both whipped our heads to the exact same spot. My buddy, who was with us though, well, there was nothing. He looked at us like we were nuts. Kinda rattled me. But the real freaky part came later. A couple of weeks after that, we brought a ladder and went up to the second floor. Normally, we'd just wander down to the ground floor after. But that night, none of us wanted to, and we stood at the top of the stairs and just stood there. It wasn't like, oh, maybe there's some kind of a gecko or something. It was like every nerve in my body was screaming, don't go, and I remember we all looked at each other, nobody had to say anything. We just climbed right out back that window and left. The very next day, the shack out back burned down. The whole thing's gone. Nobody ever figured out how. Though half the town said it was kids messing around, but I think about it, like maybe whatever kept us from going downstairs wasn't trying to scare us, but trying to keep us away. Mill's gone now, bulldozed over for some storage units. But every time I drive down River Road at night, I swear I can still picture those busted windows staring back at me. That night at the cabin. So a lot of time I'd be crashing at this buddy's cabin. It's a hunting cabin. It's in northern Minnesota. Place is pretty old, like, well, you know the kind of old it is. I'm not going to go ahead and describe floorboards any further. His uncle had lived there for a while and left behind a bunch of junk in boxes, and we'd been cleaning it out little by little whenever we went for the weekend. One spot his uncle had apparently stashed some quote-unquote special brownies in the freezer, wrapped in foil like leftovers. My buddy doesn't really smoke or anything, he's more of a beer and fishing guy, but I've had my fair share. We figured, why not? Split one. Put on some dumb DVD we found in the cabinet. I think it was Shrek 2, Scratch to Hell. At first, it was just goofy laughs and munchies, but then he started acting weird, like really up and down. He'd shove me away like I was out to get him, and then a few minutes later he'd hug me so hard I couldn't breathe. Then he'd start giggling like a little kid at nothing. And this went on for hours, and I was exhausted trying to keep him calm, dragging him onto the bathroom floor at one point because it felt safer than the creaky loft upstairs. By around 3 or 4 in the morning, I finally got him back into bed, and he kept mumbling that I was shaking the mattress, which I wasn't. Then, swear on my life, the damn bed actually started shaking. Like, not a little wobble, but a real violent shake, and his eyes were closed and he was out cold, and I'm just frozen there, praying in my head. And the strangest part is I started hearing music. Not like a song I knew, but something brand new. It was unfolding in my head, and I do play guitar, so I figured maybe my brain's just tripping. But it felt given to me, like it wasn't mine. Hard to explain. The shaking finally stopped as dawn was creeping through the cracks in the blinds. I think I passed out. Next morning at breakfast, greasy diner eggs and weak coffee. I tried to bring it up, and he looked at me dead serious and said he didn't want to talk about it. When I pushed, he finally blurted out that all night he kept seeing this thing behind me. A shadow figure with arms that bent wrong, like branches or wires. And every time I would try to comfort him, he said it looked like those arms were wrapping around him. I don't know if it was the edible or something darker, but I haven't touched one since. That cabin still gives me the creeps. The lady in the rocking chair. I don't really tell people this because they roll their eyes, but here goes anyway. At the time, I was in this tiny rental house. I was in the rural areas outside of Kentucky somewhere. I started noticing these little things. Nothing dramatic at first, like I'd be sitting in the living room, TV off, and I'd hear the sound of the rocking chair upstairs creaking. Well, there was no rocking chair up there. Never had one. Still, every so often you'd hear that steady creak, 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 like somebody's grandma just parked herself down for the evening. At first, I thought it was old pipes or the house settling. That's at least what you would tell yourself, right? But then I had my nephew over, and he was about 3. And he toddled into the hall one morning and asked me all serious, "Who's the old lady upstairs?" And I swear my heart just stopped. I never said anything about it to him. I wasn't scared exactly, but it was more unsettling. She, and I just decided it was a she, felt like she was keeping an eye on the place. A couple of times I'd be dozing on the couch and swear I felt somebody sit down at the other end. The cushion would dip a little, like when a person sits too heavy. You know that exact weight shift feeling? It's like that, and I'd open my eyes and there'd never, ever be anyone there. One night sometime later, weirdest thing happened. My niece had left her stuffed rabbit on the floor of the guest room. Next morning, it was tucked into the little bed, covers pulled up neat. My niece thought it was me, and I thought it was her. Neither of us did it. I almost got like this comforting feeling in a strange way. Like she wasn't there to scare anybody, just kind of hovering, making sure things were in order. I even caught myself talking out loud sometimes, like, "All right, I'll get the dishes, just give me a minute." When I finally moved out, long story involving a leak in the roof and a landlord who didn't care, but everything stopped. My new place has been quiet as a tomb. Peaceful, yeah, but sometimes I miss the creak of that invisible rocking chair. Weird how you can miss something that was never really yours. Oh, it's kind of like that with people. The night before my uncle passed. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. I've always been the one rolling my eyes at ghost stories, but this did happen to me, and it still does mess with me. 2 years ago, my uncle was staying at our place because he was really sick. Like the kind where you know it's near the end. We'd set him up in the spare room in the back of the house. My aunt was sleeping in there with him most nights. I was in the living room on the pull-out couch, the kind where the springs jab your back, but whatever. My cousin was in his room down the hall, and it's one of those nights where I couldn't sleep, and I remember it being around 1:30, maybe closer to 2. Out of nowhere, I hear this loud sound of shoes on the old wood floor. It's walking slow, right down the hallway. Not shuffling, not creaking from the house settling, actual footsteps. And then, just like in a movie, the kitchen light flicked on. I saw the glow spill into the living room. At first, I thought it was my cousin grabbing water, but a minute later he came out of his room looking freaked out and asked, "Did you just go into the kitchen?" I told him no, and his face went pale, and he said he'd heard the same footsteps and thought it was me. Now, my aunt was still in the back with my uncle, and she'd walk down the hall, and we would have heard the bedroom door open and shut. Plus, she wears slippers that scuff, not shoes, and my uncle couldn't even get up on his own by then. We both just stood there for a bit, staring down the hall, the light in the kitchen still being on, and I just worked up the nerve to check, and there was no one. The kitchen was empty, doors were locked. My cousin wouldn't even step in there. He just sat on the couch with me for the rest of the night, and neither of us talked much. We were just waiting. My uncle passed away the next evening. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the house is just strange, or maybe my brain was running wild because of stress. But the thing is, 2 of us heard it and saw this light. And that's what keeps me up sometimes. I don't know. Feels like somebody was walking through one last time, or maybe somebody came to walk him out. The night my uncle showed up. I don't usually post stuff like this, but it's kind of putting this heavy feeling on my chest lately. 5 years ago, I was about 20, my Uncle Joey passed away. Nobody could agree on how. It was either a bad deal gone south, or maybe he just decided he'd had enough. The cop said one thing, his friend said another. All I know is one day he was crashing on our couch eating cereal straight from the box, and the next day we were picking out flowers for his funeral. Brutal. Anyway, a few months after that, weird things started happening around our house. The first one was the smoke alarm. It went off in the middle of the night and like blaring and shaking the ceiling loud. Checked the whole house, nothing burning, no smoke, nothing we could see. My stepdad pulled the batteries out, tossed them on the dresser, and we went back to bed just thinking, okay, maybe the thing's just old or something. Except it went off again with no batteries, still screaming like the house was on fire. I swear my stepdad turned white as a sheet. The part that freaked me out wasn't even that. It was the next morning. I came into their room and this man, this huge guy, like 6'4", word construction, never scared of anything. He was literally curled up in the corner, shaking. My mom's trying to calm him down, and he kept saying, he pushed me down. When she asked who, he said a man walked straight through the wall, shoved him onto the bed, and whispered right into his face, if you lay a hand on her, like that other guy did, I'll come back and I'll ruin you. My mom asked what he looked like. When he described him, he had blonde hair, was pretty long, with blue eyes, and her face just dropped, and she said, that's Joey. A couple of days later, just to be sure, she pulled out an old photo. My stepdad wouldn't even touch it. He just stared at it and backed up like he'd seen a ghost, and he said, that's him, that's the guy. Fast forward years later, my little brother was 3, and he started waking up at night laughing, sometimes crying, saying, stop tickling me, Uncle Joey, I'm tired. Mom never told him about Joey, never showed him pictures, but the way he described him, the hair and the goofy grin was dead on. Went on for months until Mom finally had a priest bless the house, and after that Joey stopped messing with my brother. But Mom swears he still comes to her in dreams. I don't know. I try to explain it away like stress or grief or whatever, but deep down I think Joey never really left. He's just watching over her. Maybe over us too. Sometimes I'll catch myself talking out loud like, hey man, you still around? When the house gets too quiet at night. And sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's in my head, but I swear I feel him answer. The barn incident. So this one time I'm poking around this old feed store out on the edge of town. It was a couple of years ago. It's kind of a half-antique shop now. It's got junk piled up in the corners, and I kind of like places like that. Smells like dust and old, I guess. You know. So I'm checking out a shelf of enamel coffee pots when this older guy, maybe late 50s, walks right up to me and says, there you are, Cricket, haven't seen you in forever. Now, Cricket, that was what my grandpa used to call me when I was a little kid. No one else, just him. He'd been gone for 15 years, and I swear I haven't heard that name out loud since the funeral. It's not a normal nickname either, not something a random stranger would guess. I laughed at first, kind of nervously, and I told him I didn't know. He frowned, looked me over like I was messing with him, and he said, we used to play in the same neighborhood when we were kids. But here's the thing, I didn't grow up anywhere near here. I moved to this county only 5 years ago. Kept trying to brush it off, but he wouldn't drop it, and he even said something about the red wagon I used to drag around, which, yeah, I did have one of those bright red dented sides, or a bright red one with dented sides. But again, that was at my grandparents', states away. Eventually, I muttered some excuse about needing to meet somebody and ducked out with my heart pounding. I remember sitting in my car staring at the steering wheel and just unsettled, like my grandpa had whispered through somebody else's mouth. I still go back to that feed store sometimes, but I've never seen that guy again. And every time I walk past the coffee pots, I half expect to hear cricket behind me. It's silly maybe, but it gives me chills just thinking about it. The quiet field behind my uncle's farm. I was about 20. We had a couple of barns, we had some corn, we had some cows that seemed to kind of hate me. I'd sleep out back sometimes because the house was all mildewy. Well, his snoring could shake nails out of the walls, it seemed. Anyway, I dragged an old blanket out to this patch of grass behind the barn one night. No tent, just me, my backpack, and the sky. I remember it was really clear, stars sharp enough to cut glass, and then there was silence, like somebody muted the world. The crickets, the cows, even the wind were just gone. I thought my ears had quit out on me. Then this light started, and it was like a pale blue, not like headlights or a plane. It pulsed, almost like it had a rhythm. I tried to stand up, but it felt like my legs forgot how to, and my body just locked. And I swear I smelled something like burnt ozone or wet wires. The next thing that happened's a little bit hard to explain, but I'll try my best. 1 second, I'm staring at the barn roof. The next, I'm inside somewhere. Not a building, more like being inside of a bubble with walls rippling like water. Couldn't move, but I wasn't really tied up. They were figures too, and yeah, they looked wrong in the way that they're hard to pin down, but they were too human, but they weren't human. Skin was shifting colors like gasoline in a puddle. Like you could almost see stuff moving underneath it, like veins or maybe organs glowing faintly. Their faces were what got me, though. Expressions were right, but not quite. Like when you see a mannequin that's trying too hard. They didn't talk, but I felt them in my head. They sifted through stuff, like flipping through a deck of cards that was me. Memories, feelings, even dumb ones. Like the time I fell into a creek chasing a chicken. They were curious, but not mean, just detached. I don't know what they did exactly, but something. Like they rewired something inside of me, and when I came to, I was flat on my back in the grass, my blanket half off of me, and dew everywhere. The cows were just lowing again, like nothing had happened. My watch said 5:20 in the a.m. Nothing was wrong with me, no marks, no pain, but sometimes on real clear nights I get the sensation in my chest, like a second heartbeat. Faint and not mine, but maybe it's just my head, but maybe not. I haven't camped outside since, though. Is that what they call mooing? Cows were lowing. I'll have to check that. I'm skeptical about all cow information. You can quote me on that. The boy at the bus stop. Last summer, sometime in late July of 2023, it was hot. One of those muggy nights where the air feels thick and you can tell it's about to storm. I'm waiting for the bus, and I'm just sitting there hanging out with a couple of friends at this little outdoor market that we have in town. It was already dark, but the streetlight above the stop kept buzzing and flickering, which didn't help my nerves. There weren't so many people around, just me and a guy across the street smoking, and I sat down on the bench, head hurting from too much fried food and soda, kind of zoned out. And when I looked up, I swear there was this boy standing just a little ways off, maybe 15 feet away. Couldn't have been more than a year older than me. Brownish hair that caught the light strangely, almost golden, like he'd just come from swimming or something. He was just staring at me. Not in a mean way, but not really smiling either, just kind of staring. I looked away quick because it freaked me out, and I bent down to retie my sneaker. My laces always come undone at the worst times. When I glanced back up, he was turning completely the other direction like he'd been waiting for someone else the whole time. When the bus finally pulled up and people shoveled on, he wasn't there anymore. Not across the street, not near the bench. Nowhere to be seen. I even walked down the block a bit thinking maybe he got tired of waiting and left. I even went out of the way and asked the driver when I got on if he saw a kid in a white tank top hanging around. He looked at me like I was nuts and said, "Only you out here, sweetheart." I know I wasn't imagining it because I noticed his shorts too. They were black with these green stripes down the sides. A weird detail to invent, right? No one else remembered seeing him. And the whole ride home I kept thinking maybe he'd gone sitting at another stop that we passed. He wasn't, he was just gone. Still don't know what to think about. Maybe he slipped away real quick when I was distracted, but it doesn't add up. The street's pretty open, there's no alleys nearby, and honestly, I don't think he ever got on a bus at all. I try not to dwell on it, but sometimes when I'm walking past that stop at night, catch myself looking for him again. Kinda hope I don't. Kinda hope I do. The night I swore I saw something over the barn. This was way back in, I want to say, the winter of 2001. At that time, it would make me, I guess, 11 or maybe 12. We lived way out in the sticks. We were in southern Ohio, where you could actually see stars at night. The cold air always carried sound, kind of funny. Christmas Eve that year, my mom had dragged us to church for the candlelight service, which honestly bored me to death as a kid. But I did like the cookies afterwards. So we got home late, like close to midnight, which was kind of unusual. Usually we were in bed earlier, but the roads were icy and Dav drove extra slow that night. When we finally pulled up, everything was just still, like the whole world had shut up for the night. Even the dogs didn't bark, and I remember crunching across the frozen gravel driveway and hugging my coat tight. Then I heard this big whoosh. Not like a jet, not like a truck going by on the road, just like low and heavy sweeping of air. It was real slow, like when you wave a giant piece of cardboard through the air. I just froze and I glanced up, and I swear on everything, something dark glided right over the barn. It was low, too, like lower than the treetops. Maybe the size of a van, but stretched out, kinda. Behind it were shapes, and I can't tell you what they were. They were smaller and moving in a line. Not loud, no engine sounds. No blinking lights like a plane, just silence. And the stupid part is I thought of reindeer, like immediately. I didn't even want to, but my brain just did. I think I heard a faint jingling sound too, like bells. They were way off and carried in the cold air, but honestly, could have been anything. Metal in a wind chime even, I don't know. I didn't say a word to my parents. I just bolted inside and went straight to bed, and I was freaked out, but also kind of thrilled, like, what if? Now as an adult, I'm like, well, okay, maybe it was some weird military thing. That maybe my kid brain was just inventing details. But the fact is, I remember how quiet it was and how close it was, how clear that whoosh sounded. And I know I saw something big glide over that barn. Was it Santa? Well, obviously not, but was it something? Absolutely. And to this day, whenever I walk that driveway on a cold, quiet night, I still look up just in case. The thing by the barn. I was maybe 13. I was out in the middle of, somewhere in Kansas. This has been circling my head for about 20 years now. I never told anybody except for my cousin who was there with me, but I still think about it sometimes, especially when I'm walking past old barns. So my uncle had this place just outside town. It was like a farmhouse with a red barn that always looked like it was leaning a little too much. He let us stay there sometimes in the summer when our parents wanted a break. It was one of those trips where we stayed up late, sneaking Dr. Peppers and playing Game Boy until we passed out. Next morning we got bored and decided to go mess around outside. It was hot, like the kind of sticky summer heat where even the grasshoppers sound tired. Behind the barn there's this little patch of trees and a dried up creek bed. We were just tossing rocks into it, trying to make them bounce. That's when we both heard it, like somebody walking in the gravel on the other side of the creek. There was heavy steps. They were real steady, like 3 crunching sounds. My cousin looked at me and I looked at him, and then up the slope comes this, I don't even know quite what to call this. It looked like a man, but not really. It was all black, not like clothes black, but like when you stare into the inside of a chimney. Just no detail. Shoulders, arms, boots, even the shape of a head, but no face. We froze, and I remember I still had a rock in my hand, and I just didn't throw it. My cousin, he actually said, hey, like we'd just run into some neighbor. But there was nothing. The thing didn't talk and didn't move much. Just stood there a few yards away. Then as slowly as it showed up, it turned and walked back down the other side of the creek. We heard the steps for maybe 3-4 more crunches, and then nothing. Dead silent. Of course, we ran down to check, and kids are kind of stupid like that. There wasn't a damn footprint, not even one. Ground was dusty and should have shown something. But nope. We ran right back to the house, locked ourselves in the kitchen, sat there drinking warm soda until my uncle got home. Never told him, never told my parents. Every once in a while, when I drive past that area, I still glance at that barn. Wonder if what I really saw was what I think I saw. Cousin swears up and down it was real, so at least I know I'm not crazy. But it does bother me that there wasn't a single mark left behind, like it didn't belong here at all. The thing in the field. So this happened when I was about 17. I was living out in the middle of nowhere, and our house was right up against this big stretch of farmland. Just cornfields and old sheds and other things that nobody used anymore. We didn't even have much of a real basement. It was more of a root cellar. So most nights I'd hang out in the little barn out back where we kept the tools. I'd smoke there sometimes. My mom thought I quit. Anyway, one night I'm sitting on this busted lawn chair in the barn. I'm on Snapchat and I just noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I swear to God, there was this tall, dark figure just standing by the wall. Not moving, just being there. It looked like a man, but solid black. I turned my head to look straight at it, and the thing just dissolved. Like smoke in a breeze. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. Thought maybe I was tired, but the next evening I went back out there sitting in the same chair, and I had this old box of junk toys and tools I was supposed to haul to the dump. And out of nowhere, one of those stupid battery-powered toy trucks made the engine revving sound. I don't think that thing had worked in years. Picked it up, and I shook it, and there's nothing. Put it back, sat down, and a minute later it revved again. Like right on cue, like it was answering me. That rattled me badly, and I didn't even bring my phone out that night, so I couldn't record it, and part of me wishes I did, but honestly, I don't think I'd even want proof, because sometimes proof makes it scarier. The old farmhouse shadows. I don't usually talk about this stuff, but reading other posts here made me think maybe I'm not the only one. When I was a kid, we lived in this creaky old farmhouse. It was in rural Ohio. And there were drafty windows, and when the wind hit just right, it moved like crazy. There was a staircase, and it basically moaned every time somebody walked up it. Even if a rabbit were to walk up those stairs, I think it would make at least a whimper. My room was at the top of the stairs, across from a spare room where my cousin sometimes stayed when her family visited. I used to wake up at night screaming. I had night terrors. At least that's what the doctor said. But it always felt like more than that, and I'd see shapes and people shapes, but not really people. Things moving slowly down the hall. They were darker than the dark, but sometimes they looked almost gray like mist. They never came into my room, just drifted by, pausing at doors like they were checking who was there. Then they'd keep moving, always in the same direction toward the back porch that faced the woods. For years, I figured it was my brain playing tricks. Kids see weird things. Well, at least that's what I was told. But a couple of years ago, sitting with my cousin at Thanksgiving, and after too much wine, I told her about those hallway walkers, and she just froze. Then she said she saw them too, back when she'd sleep in the spare room. She thought she was half dreaming or maybe breathing in mold from the wallpaper, and the house was basically falling apart. The thing is, the old family cemetery is out past the woods, maybe a 5-minute walk if you know the path. My uncle used to say the house was built on an old wagon road folks used to take to get there. He joked that maybe the neighbors were still using it. I don't know. I don't believe in ghosts, but sometimes when I think back, I still hear the floorboards creaking, like somebody's slowly making their way down the hall. My gecko is slowly making his way up the wall. The woman at the crossing. Well, they say when you have something to share, that you should share it. So, it's here. I drive trucks for a living, mostly long hauls out west. This happened maybe 3 years ago, late fall, cold enough that my breath fogged up when I stepped out. I'd pulled off on some little state route in Nebraska after a bad wreck. Cops were already there, flashing lights bouncing off everything. I slowed down basically to a crawl, and it looked like a pickup had tried to beat the train at a crossing. Ugh. And while he didn't make it, the whole cab smashed like a soda can. They had tarps and EMTs moving fast. I didn't want to gawk, but when traffic stopped, I ended up right beside it. Here's where it gets weird. When I'm sitting there waiting, I see this shimmer like heat waves, but it was freezing out. At first, I thought maybe exhaust smoke, but it wasn't that. It looked like a woman. They weren't solid, but just light bending around her, you know. Her arms kept moving, throwing up in the air and then pounding at the hood of the pickup like she was furious. I couldn't hear anything, just this kind of humming in my ears, like when you touch a live wire by mistake. My chest prickled and felt like static. Touching a live wire will do more than that. But anyway. She'd step back and then pace and then throw herself against the truck again, over and over, and I couldn't stop staring. And the strange thing is, in my head it was like somebody dealing cards fast, like a snap, snap, snap images of crash. Him speeding up and her yelling and the train lights and the impact and dozens of little flashes. I was shaken enough that when the deputy walked past my rig, I rolled my window down and asked, kind of casual-like. I asked if anybody else was in the truck, and he said, "Nope, just the driver." I kind of stammered, "You sure? Maybe somebody got thrown farther." He gave me this look like I was being nosy, but then he radioed something in, and 15 minutes later, another deputy came back shaking his head. He said that they'd just found a female body down in the ditch past the crossing, thrown clear. I didn't say another word. Traffic started moving after that, and I drove off. I couldn't shake it. The shimmer was gone when I looked back. The whole cab was empty, yet I swear she was there trying to drag him back, or maybe just not realizing that she was gone. So when I hit a crossing and I see the arms come down, I think of her. I kind of say something in my head, something along the lines of safe travels underneath my breath. It's a strange habit, maybe, but it makes me feel better. I believe in the saying, do what you gotta do. The old barn radio. A couple years back, I moved into my grandpa's old farmhouse. The place has been sitting empty for a while after he passed. It's one of those creaky wood frame houses where nothing feels level. The kind where, like if a cat's walking, you can, kind of hear a circus. So I'm staying there alone, just me and my dog, trying to get the place livable again. It was late one night, maybe close to 2 a.m., and I was in the living room. I had this beat-up radio from the barn playing some old country station. The signal out here is garbage, so I kept cutting in and out and getting all fuzzy like. It was like somebody crumpling aluminum foil right in my ear. I leaned over just to adjust the dial, thinking maybe I'd catch it clearer for at least a bit. And right as I'm messing with it, I feel this grip on my ankle. Not a brush, not just the dog bumping me. I think he was snoring across the room at that point. But like a real hand wrapping around and pressing down. I actually froze because my brain was trying to make sense of it. At that exact second, this radio was blasting through the static. I swear to this day, it said something like just one word, "Hey," like somebody hollering at me real close. Jumped so hard I nearly kicked the radio off the table. Dog woke up barking like mad, staring right at my leg, but then there was nothing. There was no one there. No sound after that. Radio just went back to static and this twangy guitar. I know old houses are weird, and I know radios pick up straight chatter sometimes, but the timing, the hand, the voice both at once, that's the part I can't shake. Told my sister the next day, and she just laughed at me. Said it's just me being spooked in a house with too many memories. She might be right about the memories, but something when I'm walking past that radio, I still feel like if I turn the knob just right, I'd hear somebody waiting on the other end. The balloon face in the barn house. I don't even know how to word this right. Feels kind of dumb even typing it, but it happened, and it's stuck in my brain. Where I grew up, there are old barns just falling in on themselves everywhere. But in the same area, we rented this 2-story house, and it used to be a feed store in the 40s. At least that's what my dad swore. You could still smell the grain, at least in the wood, especially when it was raining. So anyway, one night I'm maybe 19, and I was upstairs in what used to be the hayloft. My parents let me turn it into my room because it had a window that looked out over the fields. Sitting on the floor playing my old PS2, my heater's buzzing like crazy because winters here are brutal. Out of nowhere, something floated up the stairs. Not a person, not an animal, and it looked like this clear, stretched balloon kind of gliding up. It wasn't bouncing or rolling, just moving. And the face on it. God, I still hate thinking about it. It was like Edvard Munch's The Scream, but twisted, like somebody had drawn it on plastic and stretched it too far. It wasn't sharp like a solid thing, more like a reflection that wouldn't go away. Faint, but with more weight. You know, you can feel someone staring at you. Well, I had that too. And even though it didn't make a sound, I swear my chest felt this vibration. Like when you stand too close to speakers at like a county fair. Or anywhere that might have speakers. So I froze, and the controller was in my lap, and I was just staring at it. Told myself it was headlights bouncing weird off the wall, or maybe my eyes being tired. But no, it lingered too long, moved too deliberately. Thought about running outside, but it was February, snow piled to my knees. So I did the next dumbest thing. Pulled the blanket over my head like I was 6 years old again. Fell asleep shaking like an idiot. Funny part is next morning my mom mentioned she kept hearing somebody walking up the stairs in the night. No one was there when she checked. She brushed it off, but I didn't even try to explain my side of the story. I've seen shadows and I've seen weird lights before, but nothing like that. Balloon thing. With that screaming face. Has anyone else ever seen something float like that? Not a shadow person, not a mist, but something that feels halfway between a hallucination and an actual object. I can't shake it, it felt too real. And I really, really don't want to see it again. The Thing by the Barn. Last spring, late March. I still don't have a good answer for this thing. I live out in the country, like proper middle of nowhere stuff, and I've always been pretty comfortable outside at night. I mean, I grew up walking around the fields with just a lantern or no light at all. My dad always said, if you know the land, it won't bite you. And I believed him mostly. Anyway, one night I went out to check the shed because the wind had been banging something around. My wife was inside with her little boy, and I didn't want the noise keeping him up, so I pull on my boots, grab the old flashlight. I head out. It's quiet, except for frogs and the wind in the pines, that kind of quiet that feels thick. And as I get near the barn, I see this thing, and the best way I can describe it is like a tall streak of light. Whitish with this weird green tint, almost like when you crack a glow stick but brighter. It wasn't standing still either, it was sliding or maybe rushing straight toward me. And it felt fast. Froze for maybe a second, then my legs just decided on their own, like, nope. Turned, ran back to the porch. My heart was hammering. I was half convinced I'd trip over my own boots and get eaten or zapped or whatever it was going to do. I didn't stop until I was back in the glow of the porch light, breathing like I'd sprinted a mile. Next morning, walk out there again, feeling a little bit dumb about the whole thing. Thought maybe the flashlight had bounced off the tin roof or caught the glass on like a chicken coop window. That could make sense, but I tried flashing it every which way and couldn't get anything like what I'd seen. And the window's on the wrong side anyway. Part that stuck with me, though, was a week later. I was talking to my neighbor, an old guy named Harold, who's lived here forever. I mentioned a light, just joking around, like, guess I saw a UFO. And he got serious. He did it real quick, too, and he said, don't walk by the barn at night. Never have, never will. Then he just changed the subject and wouldn't explain it. The TV at my grandma's place. I don't really talk about this much because it sounds like I'm making the whole thing up. But when my grandma passed, I ended up moving into her old trailer out in the country. It's a pretty tiny place, and I don't mind it. It's cheap. There's quiet neighbors and whole deal. But anyway, there's something here. It's not Grandma. At least I don't think so. I've seen a couple figures like shadows, but not quite. More like when heat rises off the road and makes things look all wavy. Usually just in the hallway and by the back door. They don't feel bad, not threatening or anything, just sort of there. But the TV gets me. Like every time I put on those ghost hunting shows, which, yeah, I know, kinda asking for it. The power in the living room just cuts out. Not just the TV, the whole damn breaker flips. You gotta go outside in the dark to reset it. It's always when I'm watching the kind of shows where they're like shouting at the air like, if anyone's here, move something. And I swear it feels like whatever's here is like, oh, you want that? Cool, here you go, no electricity for you. It's not random either. Breaker's fine when it storms, fine when I run the microwave and space heater at the same time. But the second some dude on YouTube says, touch something, boom, blackout. One time it happened 4 times in a row, and I was stubborn and kept turning it back on. Then finally gave up and put on some boring cooking show. Power stayed on after that. If I watch the same video on my phone with headphones, nothing happens. It's like the TV's the trigger, and I've gotten used to just watching stuff that way now, and it's easier than having an argument with whatever's hanging around. I don't know, maybe the wiring's janky, maybe not, but every time I go back to that breaker box at midnight with the crickets screaming and the neighbor's dog going nuts, I can't shake the feeling that somebody's watching me reset it. The Whistler by the Shed. My buddy told me to post this on this particular sub, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. We've been living in this old rental house out in the country about 6 months now. It's not fallen apart or anything, but you can tell it's been through a few families. So my youngest, who's 4, she started saying that she doesn't like playing near the back window because of the man by the shed. And at first, we just laughed it off because kids say some crazy out-of-the-world stuff, at least in my experience. We thought maybe she saw the neighbor or something. But then she told me that she saw the man who whistles funny. And apparently, he hangs by his arms. On the side of the shed, no less. I don't even know what that means. But here's the part that makes my skin crawl extra much. About 2 weeks ago, I'm in the kitchen late at night, and I swear I heard this slow, broken kind of whistling outside. Like not a tune, just air through teeth or something. Went out with a flashlight. There's nothing there, no wind either. It was just dead still. We've had a couple of other things happen, like the back door rattled like somebody was trying to get in, but when I yanked it open, there was no one. Just the yard and that stupid shed. My dog, who usually barks at anything, just stared at it with his ears down. One morning, I woke up to muddy handprints on the side of the shed. Told myself it was probably from the kids playing, but prints were too high up, like way too high for them to reach. Keep telling myself it's nothing. Old houses do creak and animals do mess around at night. Kids make things up too. But then I hear that damn whistle in my head when it gets real quiet and I don't even know anymore. So that's my weird little story. Curious if anybody else has ever dealt with something like that. The night the old clock fell. This might sound dumb, but I swear it happened. I was maybe 16, and at that time I was living at my grandma's place. It was during the summer. Her house was pretty old and had that mothball smell to it, mixed with a little bit of fried onions. Sounds kind of good to me. I had the attic room, which was cool because I had my own little space, but a little bit creepy too, especially at night. One morning, half awake, I'm in that fuzzy state where you're not sure if you're dreaming or not. Had my little radio alarm set to some country station. It kicked on, playing low, and I just laid there listening. The light through the window was that dim blue, so I hadn't bothered turning on the lamp yet. Then the music started to fade, like not cut out exactly, but melt into static. Not fast, not sudden, just slow. I thought maybe the old wires or the antenna was loose. Kept getting worse until it was all static, louder than it should have been. Like way too loud for volume that I had it on. Start to get goosebumps because, I don't know, it just didn't sound right. Then I heard a dull thump. Not heavy, more like a footstep, but like something solid hitting wood, and I froze. Radio went silent right then, like somebody hit mute. No static, nothing, just emptiness. I couldn't even move, I just lay there staring at that ceiling. Then a couple minutes go by, which felt like an hour at the time, and radio starts coming back on, but weird. Like somebody was slowly turning the knob up from 0. First faint, then clearer. Then the music was back like nothing had happened at all. I finally pulled myself up and switched on the lamp. Everything looked the same except for one thing. The old clock that sat on the shelf above the radio was on the floor. The thing is it was wedged behind a stack of books. The books didn't move, just the clock. And that clock had been there for years. My grandma said it hadn't been touched. No way it slid out clean without knocking anything else down. I stuck it back. I tried to shrug it off, but the next day I told my grandma. She just nodded like she'd heard that sort of thing before. Didn't even look surprised, just said, "That house is old and it does remember things." Which, what does that even mean? So I stopped using the radio after that. Keep this flashlight by my bed too, and I do also think about that clock. The house by the tracks. So this is something I've never really talked about because it sounds so ridiculous, especially if I say any of it out loud, but I'm going to make you read it. Every now and then I'll dream about that place and I'll wake up with I guess you'd just call it a heavy feeling, especially around my chest. I was 9 or 10 and someplace nobody really cares about. Not even going to share it. But there'd been these awful storms the week before and they were real nasty. They ripped siding off the houses, the wind was so strong, and knocked trees into the road. Nothing like a tornado, but enough that our roof was leaking and we had to start looking for a new spot. So one Saturday, my aunt drove us out to look at this house that she swore was a steal. It was out by the old train tracks, kind of tucked behind a mess of pine trees. We were in her beat-up old Buick and it's all covered in menthols and fast food wrappers. She had one of those gas station coffees. They were balanced in the cup holder, sloshing everywhere. Cousin and I were in the back, just splitting a bag of sour gummy worms that had melted into one big lump. That sounds delicious. The house itself, I still see it clear as day. 2 stories, white paint peeling off in long strips, and the porch sagging like it was tired to keep holding itself up. Half the windows, they're all boarded over, and there was this hole near the roof line, like somebody had taken a bite out of it. The storm had definitely made things worse, but it looked like it had been bad for a long time. The second I stepped out of the car, I swear it was like somebody had pressed mute on the whole world. The tracks weren't that far away. You could always hear trains in that area, but not then. Not a single bird either. It was late summer, hot enough to make the air buzz. But standing there, it felt cold. Not windy cold, more like the kind of cold that gets inside your stomach. My cousin was laughing at me for shivering like a chihuahua, but I couldn't move past the edge of the driveway. My aunt just kind of kept calling us back to come look inside, but I just couldn't. My feet wouldn't go. My cousin ran off ahead, but I stayed there frozen. This kind of makes me feel like I've lost it because I saw a man standing by the porch. Not in any detail, not like a ghost movie where they're glowing or whatever, just a man-shaped shadow. He didn't move, he didn't wave. Didn't even feel like he was looking at me, but I swear he was there. So I started crying, which was pretty embarrassing because I really wasn't the crying type, or I didn't think myself as such. Especially not around my cousin. My aunt came back out all huffy, and when she saw my face, she got soft and said, "Oh, okay, we'll go, it's not worth it." And on the drive back, my cousin kept asking me who I was talking to. I told him I wasn't talking to anybody, but he swore he saw me nodding at somebody by the porch. To this day, he still brings it up as a joke when we talk, like, "Remember your ghost buddy?" Thing is I wasn't nodding, at least I don't think I was. Never went back to that house, and I think it burned down a few years later in a quote-unquote mysterious fire, according to the paper. I'll tell you what, I never ate melted gummy worms again. Don't let a haunting ruin a good thing. The Man by the Silo. Kind of hard to write it out without sounding too weird, but maybe there's somebody out there that might have had something similar. So back when I was about 12, we lived in this old place. It was a farmhouse. It wasn't like a cute one either. It was like mice in the walls sort of place. Shared a room with my younger cousin for a while, and nights were always loud with the barn creaking and coyotes yipping, so never really slept good there. But I swear, like I'd feel our old dog. He'd jump up on the bed at night. He'd been gone for about a year by then, buried out past the cornfield. But I'd feel that dip on the mattress, same spot every time, and sometimes I'd even reach over and I swear I felt fur. I'd mumble like, "Hey boy," half asleep, and remember he wasn't around anymore. And on a couple of those nights, after my dog quote-unquote visited, I'd hear this man's voice real soft near my ear. Not loud, not scary, just a whisper like, "Sam." That's my name, by the way. Nobody else in the house called me that, not even family. Spooked me good, but I never told anyone back then. Years later, I'm talking with my old cousin about the house, just joking about how drafty it was, and she suddenly goes, "Remember that tall man by the silo?" I just about dropped my drink. She said she used to see him plain as day, and the shadow guy who'd stand by the corner of her room when she cried, or sometimes just outside the window by the silo. She never thought he meant harm, more like he was just watching. It made me think about one night I came in late from helping a neighbor move hay bales. I swore I saw Duke in the mudroom. That's my dog. The tail was wagging. Bent down to pet him, hand went through the air, and he darted toward the back hallway. And when I looked up, I saw this tall figure at the far end just standing. Didn't come closer, and I just wound up freezing. Blinked, and it was gone. Oops, I just blinked, and now I'm gone.
Join the ranks of those who dare to question the norm. Paranormal M brings you face to face with the unexplainable. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be part of our community of truth seekers and witness astonishing paranormal encounters. Dog sitting gone wrong. It's been a while since I've experienced any paranormal activity in my life. And this happened a day and a half ago, and because I hadn't had any experiences recently, it scared the crap out of me. I was watching my dad's dog, Charlie, for a week, and a bit while he was in the hospital. Nothing bad, just a knee replacement. I was staying in his new apartment, which was an old Victorian house converted into 3 apartment units. My dad lives on the 3rd floor and attic, which used to be the servants' quarters. It's a really nice, newly remodeled home with lots of character. The bedroom and bathroom are separate from the rest of the apartment, with a set of about 5 stairs leading down to it. The week started off great. I dropped my dad off at the hospital and said goodbye to my fiancée and headed over to the apartment. I figured it would be a great week of relaxing. I work from home now, so I'd be able to work from the apartment and take care of Charlie. Charlie is a big golden doodle mix, about 12 years old now. He's a gentle giant who loves taking naps on his heated bed. The first few days I could hear creaking, scratching, and banging at night, but I chalked that up to the house being old and just it being noises. Charlie didn't seem too bothered, so he didn't set off any alarms. My fiancée came over on the 3rd day to help me clean up the apartment. My dad is recently divorced, so he doesn't have a great grasp on personal hygiene or cleanliness. We set to work and started moving furniture to vacuum, mop, and started sanitizing the kitchen and bathroom. Halfway throughout the cleaning, Charlie started to get unsettled. He had been fine up until this point, but he was now just anxiously pacing the hallway in front of the stairs to the bedroom. I tried to get him maybe to go outside and pee, or to at least show me that what he wanted to do, but he wouldn't even budge from the stairs. My fiancé was just starting to get frustrated with Charlie because he was crying and barking at nothing. He went to move Charlie, and as soon as he touched his collar, Charlie ran howling into the room. At this point, my fiancé was done. He ran into the bedroom after him and chased him out. He shut the door, and we went back to cleaning. We assumed that there may have been a rat or something in the bedroom, so we brought a trap. My fiancé had to head to work the next morning, and it was a long commute, so he went home around 9 p.m. I was still in the kitchen prepping some microwave meals for my dad for after he got back, and Charlie still hadn't given up on the bedroom and was scratching at the door. I took him for a walk so he would settle down, and when we got back, he gave up and went to sleep. I decided to just head to bed too because I was exhausted. I was on the pull-out couch in the living room, so I set up some TV to watch while I fell asleep. I woke up around 2:30 a.m., desperately needing to use the bathroom. I was a bit hesitant to go into the bedroom after Charlie's reaction to it. I didn't need a rat running over my foot while I was peeing. So, I uneasily relieved myself and went back to the living room. When I got back, the TV was off. I had left it on, and it had been on when I went to the bathroom. I went to turn it back on, and I could see the outline of someone on the TV screen. They moved behind a wall as I watched, and I freaked out and ran to the bedroom to call 911. I thought for sure someone had broken in. Charlie was barking loudly at this point, and I'd let him into the room with me to protect him. The police got there in a few minutes, but honestly, it felt like forever. I explained everything to them, and they searched everywhere. There was no forced entry, no footprints, nothing stolen or broken, and no evidence of anything. They left an officer parked outside the apartment complex for an hour after the incident. I was able to sleep a bit after they left, but only with Charlie on the bed with me and the TV on. The next night was the last night I was able to stay there. I woke up around 1:30 a.m. to scratching on the bathroom door. It sounded like Charlie had trapped himself inside. I went over to the door and flung it open, expecting Charlie to run out. There's nothing behind the door. He wasn't in the Sorry, it was the bedroom. He wasn't in the bedroom, and the scratching had been occurring only a second before I opened the door. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. I turned around and saw him anxiously sitting, watching me from outside the bedroom door. I walked toward him just as the door swung shut slowly from the inside. It was black in the room, and I was terrified. I ran for the door and opened it quickly and almost ran into Charlie. I grabbed my things quickly and got Charlie all packed up and threw everything in the car. I'd forgotten his leash, so I went back into the apartment. I could have sworn that as I was leaving, I could see a person in the TV screen again. I said to myself, screw my landlord's rules about no dogs. There was no way that we were staying in there anymore. My fiance thinks I'm overreacting and isn't really too happy about having a 120-pound dog in her home, but I couldn't do it. I talked with my dad the next day, and he said that he's never had any experiences in that apartment, but that Charlie has really never liked the bedroom or the hallway leading to the bedroom, which is where I saw the person. I told him I'd never stay there again. Charlie is very happy here with us until, my dad gets his things out of the inpatient rehab for his knee, and my fiance can suck it up for 3 more days. I'll still have to go over to walk Charlie, but I'll never go back inside. It's been a while since I had experienced any paranormal activity in my life. This happened a day and a half ago. Because I hadn't had any experiences recently, it scared the crap out of me. Story number 2. Our fur baby is protecting us from the grave. We recently lost our baby girl, Missy. She was a special kitty. She lived with me for 10 amazing years after I adopted her from the shelter. Her old owner had passed suddenly in the home with her when she was 6 years old, so she had a hard time trusting me at first. It took almost 2 full years to get her trust in me enough to pick her up. Despite how difficult it was to get Missy to warm up to me, she was so loving. After she did finally warm up, Missy was a cuddle bear. Even if she didn't want to be touched, she always wanted to be in the same room with us. She slept on the bed every night, sort of took over our laps whenever we were sitting, and constantly would pat our heads and play with our hair. Missy was fiercely protective of us, too. Anytime we were in pain or sad, she would find a way to cheer us up. She was clumsy, so it wasn't too hard to make us laugh. The night she passed was the hardest night of my life. Her heart failed from an infection that we had been treating for a few weeks. We decided then and there to save her from more suffering. We told her what was about to happen, and instead of her fighting the vet and us like normal, she curled up on my lap and peacefully went to sleep before we could even euthanize her. She went out on her own terms, in her mama's lap, sleeping peacefully. That night we noticed that all the paranormal activity that we had been experiencing was silent. Nothing happened. The next day we were expecting the usual slamming of cabinets and shadow figures in the hall, and instead we saw Missy laying on the couch watching us. That night we woke up to some rustling sounds only to feel her jumping on the bed. The rustling noises stopped immediately. We didn't see her that night, but we knew she was there. The activity's been at a standstill for almost a week now. Every once in a while, we see a flash of Missy out of the corner of our eye, but nothing else has happened. I think our baby girl is protecting us in death. I just hope she's found some peace in death. Fly high, little bean. Demon in the Nursery. Recently, I was asked by my cousin to babysit her 3-year-old daughter and her newborn. We'll call the 3-year-old JJ and the newborn W for the purposes of this story. My cousin and I are very close, and I was even a bridesmaid in her wedding. JJ loves me, and we always have such a good time together. My partner decided to stay at our apartment for the weekend while I was away at my cousin's. My partner and I have experienced many changes recently, including a new house, new jobs for both of us, and the loss of a close family member. We've also been experiencing an escalation in the paranormal activity happening at our new home. It had been quiet when we moved from our apartment to the house, but in the last month, it's gotten far worse. Grief and changes in schedules can increase activity, or so I've heard. So getting out to babysit was a welcome change. When I first got to my cousin's apartment, everything was great. We caught up over tea as the girl slept in me for an afternoon nap. Cousin headed out around 3 p.m. and would be gone for 2 nights. She was worried because this was the first time that she had been gone away since she had JJ. JJ was done potty training. W was 4 months old and bottle fed, so I reassured her everything would be totally fine. Her ex-husband would check in once on a Saturday to take the girls for lunch, and I was pretty experienced in babysitting. The night after dinner and bottle feeding was done, everyone was changed and in bed. I sat up to watch some TV. I popped on some Narcos and fell asleep sitting up. I woke up to a really loud commercial, only to watch the TV shut itself off. No biggie, it was a smart TV and probably had a timer. Then I heard JJ. She was babbling away to someone, and I could tell that she was pretty unhappy with whatever was being said. Her voice was whiny and sounded like she was going to cry. I figured she was having a dream, so I went to check on her. When I got to the room, her light was on, which was unusual. The only light in the bedroom was a 5-foot-tall floor lamp that had a button that was far too high for her to reach. She's only maybe 3 feet tall, and the button is located at least 4.5 feet in the air. There's nothing surrounding the light that she could have climbed on, and nothing that she could have moved to stand on it to reach it. She was crying and was motioning to the ceiling, saying, "Zaza, he scares me." No one she's ever met has had the nickname Zaza. I checked with my cousin the next day to make sure. I got her back to sleep and shut off the light after trying and failing to get more information out of her. I decided to stay up a bit to listen for her to get up and fiddle with the light. It was around 12 a.m. now, and I heard JJ moving around in her room. I heard something scrape across the floor and thought, "Ha, gotcha." As I ran to the bedroom, I opened the door and saw darkness. JJ was fast asleep with her face smushed into her plush toy. Nothing in the room had been touched. I freaked out a bit thinking that I was hearing things when I heard W start to cry. I quickly closed the door so JJ would wake up. W was absolutely inconsolable. She kept staring at the ceiling and crying so hard that she could barely breathe. I saw in the corner of the room that her nursing chair was rocking back and forth, and it was in the middle of the room instead of against the window. I moved it back and stopped it from rocking and quickly grabbed W. We went to the kitchen, and I just held her, not knowing what I would do. I fell asleep on the couch with W and a baby bassinet next to me, and woke up with JJ sleeping soundly next to us. That whole day, I took the girls out and had some fun with them at the park, library, and a parent-toddler group. Their dad came to pick them up, and I asked them about what had happened the night before. He knew that our whole family had had experiences with the paranormal for most of their lives, so he said it might be just a close family member who passed, just checking in with us. That put me at ease and let him take the girls to lunch. I used the time to clean up the apartment so my cousin could come home to clean the place. I then took a shower to wash the child's stickiness off myself. This is when I realized it wasn't my deceased family member. The family member who had passed away wasn't vicious and would never play a prank on someone if they knew that it would scare them. While I was in the shower, a hand visibly touched the curtain and smacked it before dissipating. I cried for 2 hours until the girls came home and sat on the balcony. The whole time. I was seriously contemplating packing everything up and taking them to my house. That night was pure terror, expecting something to happen every time there was a noise. I made up a bed for JJ in the living room where I was sleeping, and brought the bassinet out again for W. I cranked the TV and kept playing the remote so the TV wouldn't time out. The girls seemed uneasy as well. Around 11 p.m., the girls were asleep when we heard the most awful scraping and dragging noise coming from the nursery. I told JJ to leave it and stay with me. I tried to ignore it, but it was obviously just trying to get my attention. I turned around for 2 minutes to grab W, and JJ ran into the nursery. I forced myself to follow after, and when I got to the door, I saw a shadow in the corner of the room next to JJ. She was trying to reach out and touch whatever it was and was babbling away about wanting mommy. And yes, I'm a good girl. As soon as she made contact with the shadow, I watched her ponytail swing back violently as if it was being pulled by someone, and she flew backwards onto her bum. She was screaming, I was screaming, and we both ran to where baby W was to grab her. I drove over an hour with both girls back to my home and to the safety of my partner. I took everything I could with me and called my cousin the next morning to let her know what had happened. She was crying and said that she had had some scary occurrences lately ever since our family member had passed. It only happens about once a week or so, but she has apparently been touched by this entity in the shower multiple times, has seen it manifest in the living room and the girls' room, and has had it skewing with the electronics in her apartment. It's been over 2 days since I returned the girls to her, and she's had no experiences since. The girls are doing well and sleeping throughout the night. I hope it stays that way. The fact that the entities in our lives don't even leave little children alone scares me. I want kids one day. I don't want a baby growing up being terrified by whatever entity has latched itself onto my family. If anyone knows who Zaza might be, please let me know. I have a feeling it's either a demon or a bad spirit. Old work ghost and new experiences at home. If you've been following my stories, you've probably heard of my old work ghost. If not, long story short, is that it harassed me and my coworkers until most of us quit. There was one person who stayed behind, my old boss. Unfortunately, he's been experiencing some pretty terrible things on his own, including being scratched and possibly bitten. He has been keeping me updated on the paranormal activity in the store. Multiple new employees have quit, leaving him understaffed. This has led to him basically living at the store, which has increased the exposure to the activity. I decided to return to the store one last time to buy a couple of things after my last doctor's appointment in that city. The first thing I noticed was that my boss, we'll call him H, was looking really tired and pale. H is normally very outgoing and happy. The second thing I noticed was the mess in the store. There was a brown liquid spill on each of the white cupboards next to the cash register, dust on every shelf, inventory everywhere, and half of the locked shelves were open. When I asked H about the mess, he just sighed and said that he couldn't keep it clean anymore because of the activity. Apparently, the ghost has been creating messes and leaks throughout the store. Every time H cleans, the ghost messes it up, so he stopped cleaning it completely. While I was in the store, we could hear random knocking noises. When H was cashing me out, we heard a loud yell coming from right beside him. A couple of online ordered bags were just thrown off the counter at him, while I was just browsing, and the music paused a bunch of times. When I was exiting the store, I turned to look through the front window and saw a man standing behind H. I had been the only person in the store for an hour and a half before I left. Glad I never have to go back. At home, the entity's gotten bolder. Around 3 a.m. every night, my partner gets pushed out of bed, violently. He now has bruises and cuts from landing on the nightstand every night. It It's been a week of him being pushed consistently. When he gets pushed, you can tell it isn't just him rolling off the bed. He lands a few feet beside the bed and has been awake a few times to feel two hands violently shoving his shoulder. We resorted to getting a railing from his side of the bed. This hasn't stopped the shoving, but it's given him time to put his arms out so he doesn't fall on his face. I've been waking up at 3 a.m. every night for the last month to something sitting in the middle of the bed between my partner and I. I can see the dent in the mattress, and I can feel it shifting around as if it's getting comfy just before shoving starts. The scariest thing about the nighttime activity is seeing both my partner and my cat reacting to whatever it is that's in the apartment. I almost wish I was going crazy so that I could just take something to make it stop. The last experience I'll talk about today happened yesterday. When my partner and I were at work, an old resident in our complex who has dementia broke into our apartment. According to his wife, he thought that it was their apartment. They lived directly below us, so that kind of makes sense. He had gone out for a walk and ended up at our door. Someone had left the door unlocked, or possibly the entity had unlocked it. When I got home, I heard my partner's Xbox playing the Halo theme and saw someone sitting on the couch. I immediately closed the door and called 911. I knew my boyfriend wouldn't be home till 10 p.m. and it was only 5. I wasn't about to leave it to chance that it was just the entity and not a real person. The cops found the old man sitting on the couch talking to someone in the corner of the room. Apparently, my cat had been sitting next to him watching the corner intently. His wife came to apologize last night and said that her husband had been talking non-stop about the quote-unquote shadow man from upstairs before he had gotten into the apartment. She said that the man had been bothering him for a long time, and that now her husband was petrified of the ceiling in their living room ever since that he was brought back home. She kept nervously looking behind me while we chatted. I kept trying to pry information about the complex and its history from her, but she rushed the conversation. The fact that 3 people are now having experiences with the same entity is freaking me out pretty badly. Haven't been able to have them come cleanse the apartments since she's just had her second baby. I'm gonna try cleansing the apartment tonight myself, but I don't think it'll do much. I know what I saw, but I don't know what it was. When my husband and I first started dating about 10 years ago, we lived in Huntington Beach, California. This is a well-developed suburban area, typically upper middle class, and has no undeveloped places or open lots. Anyway, we were driving to the beach. I was driving, and he was passenger. I still remember the exact street we were on, Edwards, heading toward Warner Boulevard. Anyway, we were sitting at the red light. We both looked over to our right at the same time and saw this thing. It was all gray and walked on 2 legs. There was no hair, fur, or tail. It wasn't facing us, so we just saw its back. It was too small to be a grown person. Instead, it was like as small as a teenager, maybe that. It wasn't wearing any clothing, completely naked. It was walking off the sidewalk and into the sewer systems, which were basically concrete V's that closed up into bigger and small enclosed tunnels. We both instantly looked back at each other, eyes wide open, and said nothing. We looked back, but it was gone. Traffic started moving and we drove through the night. I don't think we said anything to each other except, "What was that?" To this day, I asked my husband what he thinks it was. He'll nervously say that it was maybe a monkey or something, trying to convince himself. But we both know that it was 100% not a monkey. Anybody ever seen anything like this in an urban area? The radio has a mind of its own. In 2016, my uncle passed away due to a heart attack. Or at least, that's what the autopsy reported. I was 13 at the time, and this man was like a father to me. My biological father dipped as soon as he found out that my mom was pregnant with me. My uncle lived with my mom, my grandma, and me. We were all extremely close, and my mom had finally put down the bottle after years of excessive drinking for an entire year. Her brother encouraged her, and it made her push harder. To be there for him and in her right mind. Sadly, it's the only way that she knew how to cope, so his death kind of triggered her to drink again. I'm not mad at her for it, I just wish that she had a healthier way to deal with things. My uncle suffered with depression, seizures, and some other medical conditions. Life was not going so smooth for him the past couple of years before he passed. I'm now okay with the fact that he's gone because he's probably at peace now, and that helps the grieving process. But here's my paranormal experience. It was about a week after he had died, and the household was feeling a lot of pain at this time. I had to find things I wouldn't normally do to distract myself. So I turned on a soccer game and got on FaceTime with my best friend. This is the weirdest thing. My uncle had a radio in his room. Not once did I ever see or hear him use the radio. Yeah, it was plugged into the wall, but like I said, I've never heard the radio be turned on. When the game reaches halftime, I decided to run to the grocery store and get a snack for the rest of the game. As I'm grabbing the keys in the kitchen upstairs, I begin to walk toward the front door, and this is when I hear the radio. The most random station was humming in the background, and I wasn't sure where it was coming from. I listened closer and realized it was coming from his room. I told my grandpa to come check it out with me, and in the dark bedroom where he died, the blue light displayed on the radio, and it was shining, and the noise just poured out of the speakers. I knew it had to be him because his death was extremely fresh. It had literally just been a week. This had also happened again when my family was in the room. We were just taking a look around and suddenly the radio turns on again. My grandma then unplugged it, and it's been off ever since. I'm a conduit or something. It started when I was young. My father noticed an old man's spirit who would appear around me often. Then when I was about 8 years old, it took a nasty turn. Me and my brother were about to watch my first ever horror movie. He was about 14, so he was perfectly able to show me paranormal activity, right? Before we started, he said that he needed to make popcorn, so he went to the kitchen. After a few minutes, I got worried and went to see where he was. I saw someone walk down our stairs, right beside the kitchen, so I called out his name and followed him. I saw him turn the corner at the bottom of the stairs to head towards his room, so I followed again. I then saw him walk into his room. I called out again, and all of a sudden I heard him calling me from the upstairs with popcorn. I was so close to the room and that thing. I screamed for Zach, who eventually ripped down the stairs. It took quite some time to recover from that. Let's fast forward a little bit. So when I was in grade 7, I started my emo phase. You know how it goes. My buddies thought it was hardcore, so I decided to amp up the whole edgy thing. Started telling everybody I was an insane Satanist. Started carving unholy symbols into my body, all of which are still scars that I have. At some point, I wasn't even lying anymore. I was finding old rituals around grade 9 and started getting solid responses from certain rituals. I'd go on to do rituals with pals and prove spirits exist. Once we had a clear sentence, spoken to us clear as day. So I was kind of a cool person to have around, kind of like my own little form of magic. Grade 10 rolls around, and I've sort of stopped the whole satanic thing, but the spirits didn't stop. At first, we thought I had schizophrenia. I had kept seeing weird black shapes that would disappear after I blinked. Like a weird humanoid shape in my classroom that would disappear after a few blinks. So one day, my parents take my sister to her dance lessons. And I haven't had a schizophrenic attack in a while. I'm gaming with my friends and I gotta go piss. So I head over to the bathroom. Straight across from the bathroom is my mom's room and her bathroom. Her bathroom door was closed. I pee and all that, and when I'm finishing, I start hearing a sound. It legit sounded like hell, like moaning, groaning pain, sadness, mourning. I step out of the bathroom thinking I'm gonna die. A person is in the house and I'm alone. As I step out, I notice the bathroom door in my mom's room is open. And then I look and see what I personally believe to be a Wendigo walking down my stairs. I know they only exist in the woods and shit, but maybe it was a stray or hungry. Had no fur, no antlers. I'm in Canada, by the way. It totally could have been a ghost, but I'm not sure. Looked whitish and fleshy and tall, like 8 feet tall. And it was looking for something. I waited till it had gone from sight and called my parents. I just barricaded it in my room. They rushed home, took my sister out to dance for the day, and we took me to the doctors. I wasn't schizo, they said, so I don't know what that was. Fast forward a few months, and my friends that I've shown some spirits to call me. His friend is possessed. She wasn't. I guess she wasn't faking it. She did a lot of cocaine and didn't want her parents to find out. But we did a Ouija board at the cemetery. And I believe that's where the most prominent spirit attached to me. After that cemetery visit, the girl started acting entirely different. Throwing up, seducing my friend in front of her boyfriend, legit flashing boobs and all. I instantly felt a presence after a few hours that we sent her home and I forgot about it. Next, I did a thing for my friends and had some stuff move, guitars detune, whatever. Then I had an incident where I was on FaceTime with an ex, and on FaceTime we had something lock me in place and show itself to me while I was paralyzed, and she witnessed the whole thing. But now is where we get into current day, super weird things. I started dating my current girlfriend, soon-to-be fiancé, about a year and 4 months ago. I'm currently almost 19. We've been living together for 6 months. I moved in with her, and everything that's happened to me has followed. Whenever we argue about stupid small things, our door opens on its own. We hear the latch unlatch and see the crystal doorknob turn. It spooked us a few times, but always ends with an argument. Lights turn on and off. It's kind of normal for us now, but we had an experience that kick-started more terrifying ones. Many, many more. I was playing guitar with a good friend, showing him how I've improved. As I'm playing, the guitar starts to cut out. No biggie, right? I'm just using an old tube amp, that's kind of normal. But then it cuts out entirely. And through the silence, we heard a small child yell, "Hey!" at us, as if to grab our attention. Then the guitar started playing again. All of a sudden, sound was just turned back on. So we quietly left the room and talked about it with some people. A few days later, after my girlfriend's family patronizes me about how they're clairvoyant and connected to the spirits. Sure, guys, it's not like me, the literal beacon knows what he's saying. And how I'm not having an active imagination. I have another experience. I go downstairs to grab some weed and stand in a pitch-black hallway before our bedroom to text my girlfriend. As I'm texting, our door opens for me. As I turn to it, slowly but surely, I instantly tell her we're convinced something's up at this point. Then, as I was alone, playing some VR game, with no voice lines or dialogue, and as I'm trying to reload a gun, a magazine just randomly floats into my gun. I jokingly said, "Thank you," and heard someone very clearly in front of me in the room, "You're welcome." I ripped the VR off and thought I was tripping out, but I wasn't. The room door was open and was slowly closing. A few days goes by. My girlfriend is freaking out. She heads to work and I hop on some VR again. Something happened again. Very scary, like seeing it, but it was traumatic and I can't remember quite what happened. It shook me up pretty bad, but I'm pretty sure I felt it touch me. Saw its feet underneath my nose in the VR. I don't know, don't quote me on that specific one. When I visit my mom at her place, lights always flicker off when I walk by in front of her. She remembers all these stories from me saying that I've seen something and I'm terrified. She believes something is latched onto me. She also believes I can see the dead, even if they don't want me to. There's many more stories from us leaving mirrors facing each other for weeks and seeing weird things with that. Many of me being touched, my girlfriend being touched, and stuff being thrown and pushed in front of multiple people. There are also malicious stories, which I was going to write about while mentioning the cemetery, but I know even these mild stories won't really be believed. My shadow person encounter. I'd always been certain of what I saw, but when I first became aware of shadow people as a commonly reported phenomena, any doubt I had about the incident disappeared. So many people have tried to tell me what it was that I experienced, and that maybe it was just a dream or simply brushed it off with that look that says, this guy's either nuts or lying. And honestly, it's time that people start taking victims of paranormal visitation at their word. In an age where we're starting to wake up to the fact that victims of all forms of abuse deserve a voice and representation, it's sad to see so many people disregarded as mentally ill or quote-unquote confused just because their experience lacks an accredited scientific explanation. My experience was not as extreme as some that I've heard from others on various paranormal forums and podcasts, but it's definitely affected my life in a number of ways. And to have a source of so many anxieties and frustrations in your life disregarded as a dream or a fiction leaves a person feeling very alone, unable to really explore their trauma because the subject is so taboo, and very few people are willing to take your account seriously and help you search for answers. This is my story, and I assure you I have nothing to gain by bringing you a false account. I just want to put my testimony out there so that other experiences or experiencers can know that they are not alone and they are probably not crazy. There are things in this life that we don't really have a scientific explanation for, and humanity is not the only sentient intelligence that operates in this world. Beyond that, I really don't know a damn thing, but accepting that fact is the first step in beginning to fully understand the nature of this world, or any others that may exist. The first time I saw it, I was about 8, maybe as old as 10. I was living in a dingy little house in Clear Lake, Iowa, in what you'd consider to be a trashier part of town, and it was a small tourist town. My room was at the end of a long hallway, on the right side of the hall if you were looking toward it from the kitchen on the opposite end. Across the hall, the left side, was my toddler sister's room, and in the middle of the hall on the left was the door to my parents' bedroom. One morning I got out of bed and started moving toward the kitchen. When I was just about at my parents' door, looking toward the kitchen, the figure appeared. It sort of leaned into the hall from the living room, which was adjacent to the kitchen. It was a tall black figure. Black as in pitch black, but sort of smoky and hazy, like it was just a bunch of compressed black smoke molded into a human form. Everyone seemed tall to me as a kid, but this thing certainly seemed taller than my parents, who are about 5'5" and 5'6" respectively. The only distinguishable feature on the being were 2 glowing red eyes, just like circular LEDs on its face. They didn't really seem to be the size or shape of a human, or of a human eye, but truly round and glowing brightly. This detail I'm sort of fuzzy on, but that's what I recall. From the moment it leaned into view, the thing was just watching me. And when I saw it, I stopped and watched it back. I wasn't exactly scared, but had the distinct impression that this was all that there was to do, to watch. I knew this was normal. I knew this wasn't something that I should be seeing in the real world, and I was uncomfortable. But all in all, the thing was non-threatening and didn't make any advancements on me. It just stood there for a minute or two and then leaned back out into the living room. I didn't follow it to see if it had disappeared. I just went back to my room until my parents woke up. I never quote-unquote woke up from this experience. My day progressed seamlessly into a normal day. I knew this was not a dream because I was very familiar with my dreams. I had constant night terrors in this house, but I'll get into that later. The point being, the kinds of dreams I had were more distinctly bizarre and surreal than this experience, and I always woke up with an understanding that what I had experienced that night was just a dream. This was not the case that morning. If I was dreaming that morning, then I'm still dreaming because I never woke up from that. The second experience was just as brief, but a bit more menacing. I can't say how much time passed between the two events, but this incident was in the dead middle of the day, in full daylight with other people in the house going about their daily business. My mother was in the living room, and I just walked into the kitchen and toward the hall. I was now standing approximately where the figure would have been in the first occasion, looking down toward my room and my sister's. Suddenly, the figure appeared. This is where it gets really bizarre, because the thing actually crept out of my room. I mean, this thing was literally creeping, like some old school Scooby-Doo villain walking on tiptoes with its arms raised and hands bent toward the floor. If you get what I'm illustrating here, you probably laughed, because it was just as goofy as it sounds. It crept from my room into my sister's room, which is what really freaked me out about this event. The whole event was over in just a few seconds, moving in this bizarre manner. It had its head turned toward me the whole time. From the moment it crossed the threshold of my door, its eyes were already on me, as if to say, "Yeah, I'm here, straight creeping around your house, and there's nothing you can do about it. No one's gonna believe you." I had already told my mom about the first sighting, and of course she dismissed it as a dream or an overactive imagination, so I didn't bring it up, but I was really scared that it had some sinister intention with my sister. I do remember her having some nightmares around this time, which I heard from my room, her crying to my mom about how the creature from the Black Lagoon, the movie we watched often in our household, was standing in the corner of her room. I asked her about this years later, but she doesn't remember any details on that. That's it. That's all I saw of this quote-unquote shadow person. But there's another element to my life at this house that I feel might be relevant to what I experienced. As I mentioned earlier, I was prone to night terrors while living in this house. Vivid but bizarre nightmares that almost always had something to do with being chased by various demons, monsters, etc. I'd need a whole post just to describe the details of these dreams, but I later on realized that some of these occasions I had actually experienced some sleep paralysis and astral travel. I think that's a pretty woo-woo term to use, but that's the lingo people use, so I'll stick with it. One recurring type of dream that I had went like this. I'd be lying on my bed, everything seeming completely normal in my room. As it was in waking life, but I'd get this feeling, this instinctual understanding that something horrible was about to come through my door. I'd start to panic, but I would be unable to move my body. So rather than use my arms and legs to physically leave my bed, I would, through a sheer force of will, hover off of my bed and float to the corner of the ceiling as out of reach as possible. Nothing else was really different about my room in these experiences except that dread that something was trying to get in. Another night, I had a similar dream where I woke up in a familiar room to find a tall, hairy man standing above me, reaching for me. I had the strong sense that this skinny ape-like man was there to take me, and I remember doing my best to resist him. But the ending to that dream is fuzzy. That shit freaks me out to this day, more than the shadow person encounters, because this hairy man thing, pretty common occurrence in high strangeness research. So I can't help but worry that there's some real reality to that experience. I bring these dreams up because it seems that maybe vivid nightmares in certain locations, this only happened in that house, that also have reported paranormal activity indicates a relationship between the two. If you subscribe to the idea that these beings feed off of fear, quote unquote, then it seems plausible that the two are connected. Sleep paralysis. The woman in my closet. When I was in high school, I had my first experience with sleep paralysis. I was in a van on a high school trip and was sleeping with my head pointed down. When I woke up and realized I was still asleep, I frantically tried to jerk myself awake. It felt like I couldn't breathe, but I woke up before I tried to yell. Episodes like this one continued, but only when I took naps. However, I had never experienced anything paranormal during these episodes. I quit taking naps, but it didn't matter. My worst ever experience was in my childhood home. I fell asleep laying on my back and I woke up to the closet door opened. It was open just enough that I couldn't see inside. But I felt like something was in there. I tried to move my head, but I wasn't able to. I so badly wanted to get a better angle so that I could reassure myself that nothing was in there. The door opened a bit more to reveal a face. Now, let me tell you, I'm not exaggerating at all when I say that this face looked like, for lack of a better word, an old woman who had severely abused methamphetamine. She shot me an unnaturally wide grin, to which I could see the detail of her rotted gum line. We had this intense connection to one another. Just from one glance, I was able to tell that she knew I was paralyzed, and my own fear was fueling her happiness. Ew. I didn't see her reach for it, but the door slammed shut so hard that I felt it shake my bed. Then I woke up for real. I assumed I had a terrible dream and didn't sleep well the rest of the night. I woke up the next morning and went to grab some clothes to get dressed after a shower. Because I had a small room at the time, I kept my dresser in my closet. I went to grab the doorknob and I pulled it straight out of the door, pushed it back into the door and managed to get the door opened. The other side of the doorknob was against the wall in my closet. The only thing that made sense to me was that something slammed my door so hard that it broke the screw that held the doorknob together. I asked both my parents and my sister if they were in my room that night before. When they said no, I explained to them what I had experienced and what happened. My parents thought that I was just making stuff up to scare my sister and completely disregarded it. After all, this wasn't the only time that things out of the blue had occurred in our home. My mother and sister were often frightened about certain things that happened in the house, and they believed them to be paranormal. My stepdad was the only one that would 100% try to diffuse these situations by saying, "We have an old house." He eventually started to notice these odd occurrences as time went on, but that's a story for another time. 4 or so years later, I live in a different town and smoke weed every night before bed because it keeps me from dreaming, and because I like it. I don't think anything's followed me from that house, but I think it knows when I'm back home. Strange occurrences, deliberately nonspecific. Firstly, many years ago now, I was attending college, and sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with a friend. The woman who is now my wife was regularly staying in one of the bedrooms with me by the point of that time in this night. I had woken up in the middle of the night, roughly 2:30 I believe, but it was many, many, many years ago now, and looking up, I saw a shadow in the corner of the room that was in the shape of a man looking towards or away from the bed. The shadow was somewhat taller and narrower than my roommate, so I was sure it wasn't him. Not that he had ever spent time in my room, let alone in the middle of the night. So I reached over and made sure to have my hand on my wife to verify it wasn't somehow her there, and feeling her asleep next to me, I rolled the direction to grab the handgun from the nightstand. With the gun in hand, I looked back up to an empty corner. The initial strangeness passed almost immediately, and I simply placed the handgun back on the nightstand and went back to sleep. While in class the next day, it occurred to me that the corner adjacent to the wall was the only window in the room. Therefore, even if there had been a man standing directly outside that window, there'd be no way for that perfect head, shoulders, body-shaped shadow to project onto that corner. All the same, I concluded that it was simply a product of my own being, not completely awake in the middle of the night, until I got home and talked to my wife that evening. The first thing she said when I walked into the apartment was to talk of the strange dream that she had the night prior, and ask if I had gotten up in the night and gone to that corner for some bizarre reason. My response being I hadn't left the bed, but had seen a humanoid shadow. We concluded that she'd seen the exact same thing I had, only roughly 30 minutes further on into the night. Her being a confirmed believer in ghosts, she assumed that it was such. While I enjoyed reading and watching videos on the supernatural, I'd experienced no such things myself at that point, and still wouldn't call myself a believer in ghosts. We went about our evening thinking no more about the strange shadow until my roommate got home later into the night. Being a very boisterous individual, he walked through the door yelling, "You guys won't believe the crazy shit I saw last night," and proceeded to tell the two of us about the shadow man that he saw in the middle of the night, directly opposite the wall my wife and I had seen the shadow. We of course told him about having seen the same thing, and we all went, "Whoa," and I continued to think of it as a shared hallucination. As it happened, we had another friend who would stay one night a week with us, having only a single day with a morning class during the week. He would then head to his home about an hour and a bit away after class until the next week. He had done that a handful of times to this point, and had been there that night, but none of us talked to him again until it was time for him to come down again the next week. That next week, instead of seeing him, I get a phone call saying that he wasn't going to be staying the night with us from then on, having decided to simply wake up extra early and make the drive down the same morning of class. Somewhat put off, it took some prodding for him to eventually grudgingly admit that he had seen a shadow of a man standing at the edge of the kitchen, looking over at him laying on a futon in the living room the previous week, and was bothered enough that he didn't want to spend the night in the apartment ever again. That night he had seen the shape obviously, and it was the same night as the other three of us. I never had any other even remotely paranormal experience in that apartment, nor anywhere else. And that was for several years after this night. And despite every person I tell claiming it was a ghost, I again simply won't say that. In my mind, it was just the oddest of coincidences, a shared bit of half-asleep trick on the brain that we all experienced on the same night. And I don't know that any of us ever reported anything weird the rest of the time that we were at that apartment. The next thing, though, really bothers me. It bothers me to the point where I have to avoid telling people since it happened, and to my knowledge, my wife has too. A handful of years back, my family of 4 was in our SUV heading to my in-laws to let the kids stay with them for a while and give my wife and I a month alone, and this happened on the way over with all 4 of us in the car. We had been driving for a few hours and had stopped for a bathroom break and a soda. and we were sending my parents a text message to update my parents on the journey right before pulling back out of the parking lot and onto the freeway. We were due to change roads in 10 or 15 miles, with the interstate separating into a spur road via a large arcing overpass, going from the route that we were on to begin onto the new road. Chatting away with my wife after what felt like 20 minutes, I asked her if I somehow missed the interchange and all the associated signage because it felt like we had to have made a few miles already. As soon as she confirmed that she too didn't remember having passed that turn, yet we passed a sign welcoming us into the next state, not only had we missed the road that we were supposed to merge onto, somehow we were 40 miles or so away from that road. At the first exit we came to, I just pulled off the highway to go back over the situation. I checked my phone, remembering I had texted my parents right before getting onto the highway, and it had been 30 minutes since I sent her that text. I pulled up Google Maps on my phone to verify what I already knew in my mind, which was that we were miles from where we should have been, or ever could have been. Somehow, in a vehicle that won't even do 100 miles an hour, we've gone 60 miles in only 30 minutes. Not knowing what else to do, I called my parents, but was only told to watch my speed and pay more attention. They wouldn't or couldn't understand that speeding to achieve that sort of pace wasn't mathematically possible, much less when I had the cruise control set just over 70. I don't expect to find answers to what happened that day. I have no idea what such an explanation would look like, even if there was a rational one to be had. There was nothing else strange about the trip. We phoned my in-laws and told them that we would be late taking the new way, quote-unquote, to get there. Just to the point of wanting to put it out to some place like this, where even if people laugh, it's no big deal. So there, you have the two strangest things that have ever happened to me in my life. One to me, again, is nothing. The other unnerves me years later because I just can't rationalize it. And the only other responses have been bemusement and disbelief. Getting recurrent nightmares and more. Even though I had some paranormal stuff happen when I was young, it's nothing that I would say really is. Although the real stuff starts from about 1 year ago. My mother, who's a Christian, was cleaning an old church and found some bottles of, I suppose, wine, dating from around 1500. I didn't really care, but one of them looked like a rum bottle. Being a lover of all the pirate stuff, I decided to keep it. Apparently, that was a big mistake. She had to go to work afterwards and left me alone at home for 5 days. The first one, I sort of heard footsteps all around the 3rd floor in the evening, being on the 2nd myself. At first, I thought it was my cat. But after closing my door, I heard the footsteps go down the stairs really fast and a loud bang on the door. I didn't fall asleep the whole night because I just couldn't. I wasn't even afraid and really wanted to just find answers, but thought it was better for me to just be careful and watch around me. I started getting chills and the room got stupid cold for the next 2 days. In the morning or the 2nd day, after things had calmed down, I went for breakfast. I could feel someone was here, but probably thought it was just my brain making stuff. While I was making my bowl of cereal, I saw my cat meowing at something, even trying to put his paws on it, like if someone was there. I remembered seeing an article on how the face recognition on a phone worked, and how it can see things that we don't because it also detects faces made by magnetic fields or some shit. So I did the stupid thing of using it, pulling out my phone and my photo app. There was a fucking face being detected right there, right where my cat was looking, in front of a white refrigerator, so no other reason for it to detect a face. Came back a few days after to check if maybe I detected some face on the fridge, did every angle, found nothing. I stood there, not moving. The kitchen got stupid cold too, and the chills were back. The square suddenly got bigger, implying the entity or whatever it was getting closer. Put my phone in my pocket went really fast to the exit, took my dog with me, and went for a walk. Coming back after about an hour, I opened the door to enter. I had COVID a few months back and still didn't get the smell back, but I could smell the worst frickin' scent of my life. This was a corpse smell, and living in the countryside, I'm used to having bodies of dead animals, so I know that smell. I immediately went to my mother's room, took some holy water, and kept that little bottle on me because I had another interaction. Then I took a few crosses I had in my room and put them next to my bed and my desk where I was about to spend the rest of my day. The room got less cold. I heard bonking on the ceiling multiple times and my door opened for no reason. Although I slept well, probably because I was feeling safe and just really tired. The next day came as the big day. I decided to look for the cause of it all, and after feeling how fucking cold that bottle was, I knew it was his fault. I'm sorry. I tried and think of how I could get rid of the entity in it. Okay, I think he's thinking there's an entity in this bottle that was cold. The text is brutal here. And went to take salt and more holy water. Putting the necklace with the cross I was offered by monks, I brought the bottle in my living room. I could hear sounds like if something tried to get up and go somewhere as fast as possible. Thinking the entity was probably coming, I put the bottle on the ground, threw holy water and salt on it. And not really knowing what else to say, I asked God for help and if he could stop me if there wasn't the right choice. I took the bottle and threw it on the ground. As it exploded, I heard like a gun being shot and got scared the shit out of. For the rest of the week, nothing happened. I told my mother, but of course, she didn't want to believe me. A few weeks later, as I helped clean the church out, the guardian of the place told me that his great-grandfather was killed during World War II in that church with a Sten, a German automatic gun during the war. There also were reports of an old man walking in the cemetery next to the church at night. Now, I don't know the relationship between a man being killed in 1940 and some bottle of the 15th century, but after looking up some videos, the sound of the Sten was definitely the sound I heard when the bottle exploded. To end this, I didn't get any more truly paranormal activity since then, but I've been getting recurring dreams of death. Mostly the one where I have a car crash and the other I kill myself. And possessions, having people being possessed in my dream and try to kill me. Even had one where I could feel the bite of something onto my neck when suddenly waking up, but it disappeared 5 seconds after. The worst part is that sometimes, even during the day, I suddenly feel someone watching me, always from the same spot in my room where there's a chair. I don't know why, maybe I'm just getting crazy, but every time I have nightmares, I feel exactly like I'm being watched, right as I'm getting up. So yeah, that's all. Although it's pretty long text already. If you have any idea on how all of it worked out and why the hell I'm getting this feeling and nightmares at least once or twice per week, just let me know. Also, if you think this isn't paranormal, I would still love an explanation of the different things. Because for me, if it's not something from another world, it just doesn't make sense.